Employers can show that they recognize and understand the wants and needs of their workforce in innovative ways through their benefits offerings and having candid conversations about things like career growth, fulfillment, and corporate purpose. So we'll be exploring how can leaders ensure the support they offer employees will cater to different generations and diverse employee groups within the workforce, and what kinds of metrics or indicators should be used to evaluate the effectiveness and the impact of initiatives that promote this employee satisfaction and retention. And that's including benefits programs that support productivity as well as well-being. So that is the topic, and our moderator is Emily McCrary Ruiz Esparza, a From Day One contributing editor and a freelance journalist who covers the future of work, HR, recruiting, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and women's experiences in the workplace. She has a great story published today on our website about older workers and their relationship with technology. It's not quite what you think. So her work has appeared elsewhere in the Washington Post, Fast Company, Quartz at Work, and Digiday's Work Life, among others. Emily, we're excited to have you moderating this panel, so please take it away.
Thank you, Steve, and thank you guys for having me. Welcome to all of our panelists. We'll wrap up the day with just a really nice conversation about engagement and giving employees the recognition that they need. Before we get into our questions today, I'd like to have each of our panelists introduce themselves very briefly. Just tell us who you are and what you do, and then we'll get into our discussion questions. We'll start with Diane. If you'll kick us off, just briefly introduce yourself, please.
Hi, everyone. I'm Diane Paceras, EVP of Human Resources here at Vitas Healthcare.
Thanks, Diane. And Vitas does what?
We are the nation's leading hospice care provider, and in fact, operating in over 15 states with 12,000 employees.
Thanks, Diane. Amy?
Hi, this is Amy Major. I lead talent management for Verisk Analytics, and we are a global company, about 7,500 employees, and we provide technology and data analytics for insurance companies.
Thanks, Amy. Rob?
Hello, everyone. Rob Catalano. I'm the co-founder and chief engagement officer at WorkTango. WorkTango actually helps companies with our technology, listen to employee sentiment, recognize, reward employees. Been in this space for over 2 decades, love every minute of it, and improving work lives, which is obviously critical to me. And I have to say, during the introductions, I took a drink of my coffee and thought that this probably looks like a Guinness, and it's not. It's cold coffee. It's really hot in Toronto. So I just wanted to make sure that was clear.
Okay, sure. Take your word for it. Errol.
Thank you, Rob, and thank you, Emily. Hi, everyone. My name is Errol Minga. I lead human resources initially for North America, and just recently took on a people strategy position globally for the organization. Media Monks is an incredible organization. I think how I could easily explain this is that we are a digital-first marketing advertising firm. We've also worked with technology services. And we focus on content, data, digital marketing, digital services. Essentially, what we do is we produce websites, games, films, social media content, advertising, campaigns, platforms for some of the leading brands globally. We're a 9,000 employee organization as well, and I'm excited to be here.
Thanks, Errol. Jenny?
Yes, of course, thanks. My name is Jenny Mayorska, and I'm the CEO and the founder of the company called Stork Club. And at Stork Club, we provide global solution with access to end-to-end reproductive healthcare. And that includes every person, regardless of their journey, regardless of their stage of life, from when people don't think about building families yet, but just want to make sure that they will be able to do this when they are ready, to the stage where people go through different hormonal changes, menopause, low testosterone changes, and others. Really excited to be here and share my perspective.
Thanks, Jenny. All right, guys, let's get to it. So the first question I have is about measuring employee satisfaction and how engaged employees are. Generally, when we do that, we think of employee sentiment surveys, just asking employees at a point in time, often at specific intervals, how are you feeling about your work? Maybe it's in that promoter score that you're asking your employees about. Not necessarily a bad thing. My question for the group is this still best practice? Or are there other more creative, more coming in from the sideways to get at this question. Rob, you mentioned you've been working in this area for quite some time. Maybe you could start us off here.
Yeah, sure thing. So when I meet organizations, and even based on a lot of the research out there, companies are still using the annual employee sentiment or engagement survey as the predominant way to understand employee sentiment or measure things like engagement. But what I've seen companies do over the course of a year or so, and a lot more recently than what I've seen in the past, is shifting the strategy into what I call an active listening strategy. And effectively what that means is, well, how do you build more frequency in understanding employee sentiment? But it's not just about measurement, right? Measurement is critical so you can trend is sentiment moving up or down. To your point, maybe it's your engagement index or ENPS index, but it's also looking at the whole employee life cycle, right? It might be their onboarding experience, it might be their DEI experience when it comes to feeling included or belonging in the organization, through change management initiatives and so on. But when many companies get more frequent and across the employee life cycle, the one thing they miss out on is they only measure. And what I mean by that is they don't get diagnostic feedback about people's experiences. Is what we just launched working really well? Is something that we're going to do in the future? Is there feedback you can give us to lead us down the right direction? So a lot of companies, again, are shifting that one time a year to more employee life cycle, more frequent, but also complementing measurement with diagnostic feedback. And the interesting thing about it is that the reason why the once a year doesn't work is that you measure to act, right? And if you're only checking once a year, no one has accountability to act or do something different, right? People aren't going to change their behaviors if you're going to check in 365 days down the road. So when you build this type of active listening strategy, again, a lot what I'm seeing companies find success with, that's where they see rubber hit the road. That's when their leaders are involved. That's when there's accountability. And again, that's just a shift I've been seeing, and especially doing this stuff day in and day out with companies for the last 8-9 years.
I'll open it up now to the group. What other metrics are you tracking? With what kind of frequency are you delivering surveys or asking for feedback in maybe interesting, non-traditional ways? Diane, I saw you nodding your head, so I'm going to come to you.
Thanks. So I don't know that they're necessarily non-traditional ways, but we pay very close attention to our retention. And we do a lot of diagnostic and analytics around when people leave us, at what point in their career, and really take a look at the trending line for us, particularly as it relates to new hires, but for all, so that we can have a better flavor as to at what point do we need to be paying closer attention? Can we be doing a better job of engaging folks and having them feel that sense of belonging? But also, in addition to that, we do exit interviews. And so we pull that data and also marry it up with our engagement survey data to really get at what are these common themes, right? And where can we do a better job? And we actually focus many of our company people initiatives as well as HR people initiatives on those key areas to try to move the dial even further.
I like the idea of point in career that you're trying to find. So does that refer to someone's leaving us, very early career, mid-career? Is that what you're referring to there?
Exactly. What's our 90-day turnover? What's our folks that are leaving us before a year's up? And then more so we see where they're leaving us at a 3 to 5 year standpoint. So is that because of career opportunities? Can we do a better job of making sure that we're doing development plans, et cetera, and trying to maybe, turn the tide a bit at that time in their career or beyond?
Yeah, looking at it in context, I guess, is important because, Rob, what you were saying earlier, picking, your 1 year interval not only does not really hold anyone accountable. What does that point in the year necessarily mean to anyone? It's almost chosen at random, but if you can put it in context with how long someone's been at the company, you kind of know what people have been exposed to 90 days in. If 3 years in, people are getting an itch and deciding to go somewhere else.
most people do it right after comp upgrades. So, it's this positive sentiment. So if you can be more frequent, you lose the that moment in time item and have more data points to make better people decisions for sure. But
Yeah, it's
I
so
think,
weird. Why are they always so high then?
fair. But I love the point about marrying your data up with other items. Like if you can correlate engagement based on tenure or correlate engagement to retention paths or even leaders in the organization, now you can start layering on other information to just garner more, more data to make better people decisions.
Right. Danny, I know that at Stork Club, you do something called stage of life surveys. Maybe you could tell us about what that is and how you decided to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I would say, what we really see is a lot of what surveys collecting information might be not necessarily reflecting the reality, right? Some people just really feel shy still about different interviews and surveys. And so what we do for our customers, as well as, of course, within our company, we talk about is breaking the social stigma and talk about, hey, what are your goals outside the workplace, right? Where you are at your family building journey, your reproductive journey, right? As we all know, people really feel sensitive to talk about this, even to close friends. So again, you're not necessarily getting this information, but that people will be making very specific decisions based on this, right? And very often it does affect career. We see studies where 50% of women actually make decisions to switch their career and go for less paid jobs, not be so ambitious about promotions, right? And working really hard because they're planning a family and they know that maybe the workplace is not going to be as supportive. So they will have to step down, right? But what we also see that there is really if you plan it right and you understand this is where your workforce is right now, right? Based on those categories, you can understand and provide this necessary support so they feel they don't have to make those choices. And instead, they can stay in the seat, right? They know that they have access to, let's say, solutions to build a family, like again, IVF, surrogacy, child adoption, the company supports. And what data says that this type of support really works to engage people, to keep them loyal. Some data says that about 88% of people, not just women, but both men and women, right, if they're partners, decided to stay in the company and be loyal and actually have an extended tenure if the company sponsored this type of support for them versus if they would have paid out of pocket. And this is just for this type of support, right? If we talk more about, again, aging population, we know right now a lot of companies have their executive, their directors, right, at the stage where it is menopause. For some, actually millennials, surprisingly, like we are at the stage that for some of us, it's early menopause already, right? And we have to think about this because it does affect productivity, which is engagement in a corporate culture. And men do not talk about this at all. It's a big social stigma, but low testosterone with early 40s and moving forward does affect productivity and engagement as well. So how do we again support, right? With Stork Club, what we see our customers are asking virtual visits to get the support becoming a complete must-have. We're getting to the next level, how we can also help with personalized medication protocol, because hormone replacement therapy achieved real greatness, and we can help and see more engagement from people and them being grateful and stay with companies longer.
Yeah, it's just my microphone's not cooperating with me. Yeah, everyone, just the position that they're in their life, their stage is just going to have an effect on the way they're able to work, how they're able to engage and be present or struggle to do so. Harold, I know that at Media Monks, what made me think of this is, Jenny, you talked about who they want to be outside of work, the goals that they have. I know that you have some benefits, some stipends that allow employees to make choices about, how they use their benefits outside of work. Could you tell us a little bit more about those?
Absolutely. So this year we introduced what we call the lifestyle savings account, Emily, and what we've done is we've realized, as was previously mentioned, obviously at different stages of life, individuals have different needs. So what we've done is we've combined a few of the most prevalent benefits that some of our employees really enjoyed with our organization and offered a lifestyle savings account that includes pet insurance for our employees. It does include the ability to get reimbursed for talk space, for mental health, of course, initiatives. One Medical, which is an online platform for quite a few organizations that are providing to their employees at this point. And of course, for those who are growing their families or taking care of elderly, dependent care contributions. So it's a really unique piece for us to create a pool or a fund that's available to each of the employees so they can utilize it in the way that makes sense for them rather than predefined.
Yeah. So of course, great benefits aren't the only thing that will keep employees at a company long term. You have to have a good environment. Amy is our representative of talent management on the panel today. Maybe you could tell us a little bit more about the other elements of employee experience that work particularly well for employee retention.
Yeah, sure. And I think my head is going, just listening to some of the comments, is that it's a lot about culture and, just the way we can try to build culture. Our leaders and managers really play a big role in that, in the way people access what's available to them or take care of themselves. I think when it comes to retention, people want to know that their work matters. They want to know that they can do the right thing for their customers. They have enough autonomy. They have flexibility to take care of themselves when they need to, or, those cultural aspects come down to some of the relationships and the way leaders role model or reinforce or live some of the things that we want our employees to do. We've done a lot of work on purpose and values over the past couple of years. We've had some pretty big changes in our business and our kind of business focus and strategy, and did some work to realign what our values and purpose are. Some of that is marketing, but a lot of it is about how we ask our leaders to show up. So it's their presence, it's them responding directly to feedback, it's giving that real access that employees want to leaders, and so that they can start to see their future here. So I emphasize culture, and there's other ways that you can kind of listen and respond and make it feel, a larger organization feel like a smaller place.
Diane, I want to ask you about your industry is such a necessary one. Of course, hospice care, healthcare, especially, outside of maybe typical hospital clinical settings, is becoming far more popular and far more used. And that's a career that's incredibly rewarding and incredibly necessary, but also incredibly, I'm sure, emotionally draining, tiring. It's probably in equal parts rewarding and exhausting. And culture has to be a big part of recognizing your employees. As Amy was saying, that's just necessary. Can you talk about how the recognition helps with employees in a career that's really tiring and demands a lot of them emotionally and physically?
Yes, of course. You're spot on with your comments, and our teams honestly are nothing short of amazing, and they do an incredible job caring for patients and families when they're most vulnerable, at the end of their life or the end of a family member's life. And so recognition and support and appreciation is incredibly important. And like most companies, we do the day-to-day stuff. Our leaders are really great about, cooking for their employees or bringing in the ice cream truck and pizza parties. But some of the things that they've appreciated most and have been most gratified with would be things like, we send letters at certain points in the year to their home, to their family, basically talking to them about the incredible work that their son, daughter, spouse is doing at VITAS, and also thanking them for the support that they give that person day in and day out. And, that has been incredibly rewarding to the employees, because they have seen that as, the utmost respect, of them, and being able to recognize them to their families. But that said, I have found in healthcare, and our employees are no exception, our employees are most gratified by feedback and appreciation wrapped around people believing that they're making a positive difference for their patients and their families. So the thank yous and the cards and letters that come in all the time, from our patient families, particularly after one passes and a family member just speaks to all the great support that they received from the team and the individuals. They really, really see that as the most meaningful recognition. And what we've done is we've taken that and to emphasize what matters most to our employees. We created an internal recognition program that basically enables their peers, their bosses, to send a note in with respect to how an individual goes above and beyond, how they make an impact, how what we call they make a VTOS difference. And it's been overwhelming to me how successful that program has been since we started 2 years ago. We now have had over 30,000 folks send in nominations and recognition for folks. And what we do is their team leaders basically read those recognitions in their team meetings. So being recognized in front of their peers is equally important. And they have the opportunity after, with certain levels, after being rewarded with those recognitions, to earn pins. So the bronze, the silver, the gold, and in fact, they wear them proudly on their badges. And so really trying to emphasize and recognize based on the way that folks really find most meaningful, I find has been the most rewarding. And, it just keeps coming back. And I send out notes myself when folks get their pins, because it's not everybody gets a trophy. You have to have 10 and 20, what have you. And the notes I get back are just incredible. This recognition means so much to me. I do what I do from my heart. And in fact, it really matters to them. So that's really gratifying to us as an employer.
And a lot of you have workforces where they're not in person, they might be all distributed, all remote work, and recognizing those employees is a different matter. Or maybe you could tell me that it's much the same that Diane described. Harold, your workforce is not taking care of people at the end of life stages. You have really different responsibilities. And so I'm wondering how you recognize employees whose work maybe isn't always front and center, isn't always visible, maybe folks who aren't the ones to talk about what they do. How do you recognize those employees and make sure that they're getting the recognition they need?
Of course. So similar as you may, imagine with some of the other peers here and colleagues, we do have a variety of plans. One of them has been, especially recently, we do have the Employee of the Month approach, where we does provide some public recognition for work that they've done. We have rolled it out initially for our people team, which is nearly 300 employees strong globally. We have found that truly does make a huge difference for all of our employees. We understand that everyone brings a different personality to work, of course, and who they really are. So we do want to make sure that we do take time to understand and of course, recognize every single one of our employees whenever possible. We do have a variety of different approaches. We do celebrate milestones as well as an organization. We, whether it is work anniversaries, as was previously mentioned, or remote, for especially our remote employees. We have also found that sending a personalized note, which we've introduced this year, does make a difference. And I think what's even more rewarding is the responses that we get rather than what goes out. So it's been, I think, incredible. Ultimately, we are currently, post-COVID, of course, especially in the United States, because we are a global organization. We do have a certain percentage of our organization that is remote, and we do constantly find ways to bring them into the conversation, whether we're doing recognition calls, whether it is providing new chances for people to set up local get-togethers at various parts of the country. we're very much experimenting in a positive way, and we found some good feedback overall from our employees.
One thing I thought that would be worth just adding, and again, I've seen these strategies implemented, for years, is that just calling out and reinforcing a lot of things that were just said. A lot of organizations, I think it's important to think about those milestones, whether those are birthdays or anniversaries or personal milestones, and building a structure around that. Then there's structures around employee of the month or cadences in which we're going to reward or nominate folks. Where I think where rubber hits the road, and a good complement to that is what I call peer-to-peer recognition, always on recognition, where you're allowing this not to be a top-down initiative, but side to side, bottoms up, catching people in the moment when they're doing something that's either living your company values or conducting the behaviors that are critical. So that's where you really see impact. That's when you see a culture of recognition. And I think if you can look at the world or your strategy in those three buckets and have them all complemented, that's when you start seeing engagement go up in other items as well. Now, we didn't talk about rewards. That's another amplification of how recognition can turn into something that's meaningful, something you can see day in, day out, at home or your desk, or something that's meaningful for the individual. But I always like to structure the strategy in those three buckets when it comes to a robust recognition strategy as well. Last thing I'll say though is, despite whatever you put out there to the world and its structure and recognition, how do you just build it into the fabric of your day in and day out? Call it out at the weekly meeting or at the monthly meeting, reinforce those stories. People remember stories more than remember anything else. So I just find that no matter what you're doing, think of how you can infuse that into the culture day in and day out, and make that one-to-one recognition moment a one-to-many, and just challenging companies to thinking about things that way as well.
Yeah. Jenny, did you want to jump in? And then we'll come back to you, Errol.
Yeah, absolutely. I just wanted to add that 100% agree with recognition of a person. What we also notice really meaningful is recognizing again, what's the life outside of the work, right? And it's amazing. People have hobbies and passions, right? And many of them are actually somehow maybe even related to the overall mission of the company. Just like one example, one of our key navigator who's very passionate about reproductive health care and helping people also is very passionate about justice. And she actually got an additional education and certification, and now is very active in her community, right? How can we acknowledge this, talk about this, and support her? And even recognition is very meaningful, right? This is where people see that the company sees them as a whole person, and they see that people with families might be really benefiting from just extra a few days off, right? Just to be able to spend the time with family. And it might be actually just for a company more efficient in general, right? Just give this space. So again, people with wherever they are on their journey can achieve their personal goals as well.
Errol, did you want to jump in before we go
Sure.
ahead?
I think Rob, as Rob was speaking, I was thinking of we do have another department within our organization that does a fantastic job, and we call it the people experience. So that probably would be a little bit closer as well to what we're discussing at this point. Something else that we are as a people team introducing and have introduced to our organization is what we call Feedback Fridays. So Rob, this goes along the same lines of what you mentioned. This is an opportunity where colleagues can call out other colleagues. We work with obviously various platforms where individuals, whether remote or in office, can utilize to communicate, and we've built in channels for people to do just that. And it's a wonderful feeling to kind of to see that pick up steam over time. We introduced it as essentially a pilot program, and to date it's doing fantastic.
Well, feedback, let's talk about that. That's another way for recognition. Amy, I know this is something that you guys have instituted more recently, a specific program with a cadence, talking to employees about where they want their careers to go, not just, hey, you did a great job on this project, but another way of recognizing employees is, of course, investing in the way they want their careers to go. Could you tell us more about the program that you guys have made?
Yeah, sure, absolutely. So we definitely were seeing that people that believe they can have a career here are much more engaged. So just in some of the surveys that we do, going back to earlier in the conversation, and we did some work to listen to our employees, because the feedback that we got about our review process was not great. and traditionally people think of reviews as evaluative. You're just looking back and nobody really looks forward to it. And in many cases here, it was happening maybe once a year, which we know from this conversation is just far from enough. So we made a ton of changes. One is just encouraging that day-to-day conversation. So how do we get managers and employees to have a good one-on-one conversation? And then we also have our quarterly conversations. And yes, there is that aspect of just of checking in on progress and goals, but we prompt other conversations, whether it's about development or have you asked your employee what their career goals are? Have you prioritized these employees because of a milestone or because they're a person that you're really targeting to develop? We've identified them as top talent. So we try to prompt our managers to have these conversations. And then we also ask if it happened. So, so that also encourages by asking the question if it happened, can encourage that to happen even more. We've been doing this for a little bit over a year now. And this past engagement survey, we could see the data where the groups that have higher participation also have higher engagement, almost line by line, higher participation. You could sort it from participation and then sort it by engagement scores. And you just see that there's that connection there. So we're getting really positive feedback. And then we're also looking at questions like, I see myself here in 2 years' time. And that's what we're seeing, that people that are participating in these conversations, which it's just more than a review. We're trying to get to what employees care about. They're more likely to see themselves here in 2 years' time, or they're more likely to believe that they have good career opportunities. So we're really trying, again, to try to drive retention, just weave it into that everyday experience.
Amy, I'm on a personal mission to remove the vernacular performance review or performance management, like to call it performance development. It should be more about developing the employee. So maybe we can pair on that and wave that flag.
Love it.
Rob, is that something that have you instituted anything similar? So when you say you want to get away from performance review and into performance development or talent development, can you talk about that a little bit more?
Exactly everything that was said, right? How do you try to enable more frequent conversations that are focused, again, on that person's development and not looking in the rearview mirror? Like, what are that person's aspirations? What are their goals? What are their plans? And when it's focused on, what are we going to do versus let me rate you on one in the past, people's ears perk up and see there's value in them. So all the things you mentioned in terms of structures of check-ins and conversations are all part of it. And then I think to your point earlier, or the point that's been made a lot here, is doing it once a year isn't going to work. It's not going to work for listening to employees. It's not going to work for recognizing people every 5 years for sitting in their seat. It's not going to work for a performance conversation. So I think that frequency is also something that we infuse and kind of mandate one-on-one conversations or those quarterly check-ins at a minimum.
Errol, go ahead.
If I could just add, I think one of the other things that we do a little differently, which may be taken for granted, is we include our employees as an audience. So the employee has a voice. The employee is a participant and leader in these conversations. So when we do training, we do training for our employees so that they're able to have their voice. They're able to, help them get what they want out of the conversation, and set some realistic expectations about, they have to be prepared. You have to prepare for all sides, but I think acknowledging the employee as a stakeholder in that conversation is important.
Errol, do you want to jump in on this one too?
Of course. In addition to what was just mentioned, I think Rob, love the way you think, the way what we do in our organization. We call them quarterly growth conversations, more of a windshield rather than a rear view kind of conversation. So this is something that we're instilling naturally. As you said, performance reviews are somewhat instilled in everyone's mindset. So even as we get new employees, there's quite a bit of conversations that we'll have around them as to why are we calling this such, and how can I just share with you as to what I've done lately. So, which is, I think it's a mindset shift, as you said. So we're constantly working with that, creating an opportunity for managers to sync with employees. We found out that especially over the past decade, of course, the speed of work has increased quite a bit. So making time to sit, it has to be a conscious effort. So.
Diane, I know that you have a unique way of recognizing employees. I'm thinking about a podcast that you guys have started. Tell us more about how you decided to do that and how you're using this for employee recognition.
Sure. No, it's actually quite fun. And in fact, why we decided to do it was, as I think about our appeal internally and externally, folks expect me to talk about how wonderful folks are and how great what we do at VTOS is, et cetera. But hearing it from our people, whether it be our internal employees talking about their own career path and their growth and why they chose hospice and why they stay in hospice, or, external, the external marketplace. So, we wanted to present the lens of the employee. And really have it unfiltered, natural, genuine, authentic. And that's really worked. And so, candidly, once a month, I interview or have a recorded interview with a few employees, and they are the stars of the show. And I'm asking questions that basically helps to, give them the foundation to tell their story and tell their perspective and their insights as to what it's like to do their role and in fact to work in VTOS. And they're talking about everything from the special circumstances that they deal with day in and day out, how they and their team have fulfilled a dying patient's wishes by, taking them out to do skydiving. True story, that happens. Or I heard a story this morning that was, I had an employee or a patient that wanted to do their last go-kart ride and they did it. And so long story short, they're able to talk about those things, but also talk about how they value and interact with their interdisciplinary teams and, how they candidly could not do their jobs without, and how those resources are a true differentiator for them as they're out they're in the patient's home, because they too are remote. They're in the patient's home. And sometimes they're up against circumstances, A, they've never dealt with before, and they need help, or B, that they are struggling with because it's not easy. And that said, they're able to tell it unfiltered. And it's so heartfelt. It is so heartfelt. I just filmed, we just recorded rather, our 5th podcast this morning. And I can honestly say that I know based on their feedback that they get a lot out of it, but I almost feel like I get more because it is really emotionally intense as they talk about the special moments that they've had throughout their career here and what that's entailed. So it's wonderful to give them the limelight, to give them their shining moment that, many others get to hear and view, as well as their peer group and their, families and friends.
Public can listen to, or is it available only for internal employees?
They're open. Yeah, they're on many of the Apple broadcasts for podcasts. So, or Pandora, you can pretty much go on any podcast location and be able to pull them up. But they're called Passion in Action. And unfortunately, I'm not big on my face on things, but in fact, unfortunately, you'd see my smiling face on the cover. But in fact, they're called Passion in Action at VTOS Healthcare.
Very creative. I admire that. I want to talk about recognizing the unique needs of different communities. So that might be, we might think of this in terms of recognizing needs the way we go to our ERGs and say, you represent a demographic in our workforce. You can tell us something about the needs of people who belong to the LGBTQ community, caregivers, be that parents or someone who cares for an older family member, people of color, women, just different intersections of everyone's identities. Sometimes those groups will have something very specific that they need, or a type of recognition that maybe other groups haven't thought of or haven't recognized yet. Jenny, can you talk about how you recognize unique needs of different demographics at Stork Club?
Absolutely, Emily. It's such an important topic. I've been really privileged to work with an amazing team. So our group, our team is very diverse. Only on care management team, we have about 75% BIPOC and LGBTQ community members, although the company is, of course, much bigger. I see that those companies who already like form those AG groups, they're lucky, right? It's not necessarily the case for every company. So we take more personal approach, and we just better understand and educate ourselves from first outside world, right? Still not that many know that we are actually amidst maternity healthcare crisis and equity crisis, right? And when we think about this, what does it mean? Well, actually, people of color die significantly more often. It's like 3x as much white population die during birth and postpartum, right? It's a really, really horrific situation in the country. And in order to resolve it and support this population, we really have to get together and address, hey, how can we support each particular individual, but also an entire community? To your point, there are different priorities there, right? So the way we also work with our customers is we identify what their population looks like, right? Every company is still different, depending on the industry, on location. With very large companies, another common problem, not necessarily group wise or category wise, but people do live in rural area. And that means very limited to non-access to healthcare, right? So we actually, as a company, came up with a solution. How do we support those mothers or people who are trying to conceive for treatments through access to services? Sometimes it's virtual, sometimes it's a combination of a proactive care navigation where we basically figure out a specific case. How do we help a couple here to really get the best outcome and experience? And then one of our customers, actually just yesterday, we had this conversation in another webinar, is shared they were really thoughtful to support their employees based on their feedback and offer fertility coverage. And their main focus was to support their female population. What they got as a feedback after they've been having a program for multiple years is that the LGBTQ population was very grateful and came forward and said, hey, this was really immense support for us, right? And they didn't even plan that initially. So it was fantastic addressing the needs. So my recommendation would be to companies who do not have specific groups, right, to get this insight is educate yourself and maybe connect with either providers who are saying that they are specifically helping with diverse needs, right? And there are really top priorities there, which are really necessary, but it really depends on the very specific population where you have the majority of your employees in that group.
Thanks, Jenny. We don't have a lot of time left, so I'm going to close with having each of you answer one question very briefly, which is, what's been one of the most meaningful ways you felt recognized? Could be the current job that you have, could have been 20 years ago. So what's a very meaningful professional recognition that you've had that sticks out to you? I'm gonna put Rob on the spot first.
Oh wow, that's a good one. I think as I look at my t-shirt, one of the things that this means is when we created the organization, we said we don't want a mission statement because missions end. We wanted a passion statement and something that rallies folks into one major focus, evaluates a lot of the decisions that we make in terms of our own values and the way we work with our customers. And the idea is that we spend most of our waking time at work. So if we can make work wonderful, that will improve people's lives in general. I think one of the most memorable recognitions on my side is we actually just went through growing our company, merging with another organization, and just hearing feedback from others that we've brought along the journey to say, you said in our first interview that improving work lives is how you hire, when people's eyes light up for that. And it was that initiative and focus that brought the right people on to bring us to that level of growth. So, as a business leader, as someone who really, cares and sees the value of this passion, just hearing other people say that this was, instrumental in the growth of our company, but also doing something purposeful, to me, that was the singing rendition of recognition I'd love to hear. So one of the most memorable ones for me.
Thanks, Rob. Amy, what's one way you felt very recognized professionally?
What's going through my mind is, across groups, thinking about the last question, flexibility is something that I think, whatever it might be that the specific need is, that flexibility really helps whatever the need is get met. And I feel like when I felt the most value, it's times when, there's just way too much going on, and, how are we going to get through this? But I did have the flexibility. I could make the choices. I could reprioritize, or I could make the time. And some of the programs that we have to do that, we in the summers, we give 2 for You, is a couple extra hours a day for people, or no meetings, for a Tuesday morning. And we're trying to acknowledge that flexibility, and flexibility is the word that comes to mind for me as consistently something of value.
Well, I'd love to have us keep going around, but we're running out of time. Thank you so much to all of our panelists, Amy, Rob, Diane, Harold, and Jenny. Thank you so much for your time and for being willing to share your expertise with us. I'll turn it back over to Steve from Day One.
Thank you.